Back on Inside Tennessee, Don.
Let you respond to the discussion we were having before the break about officers in schools and the difficulties with, are they there to protect or are they there to prosecute? So.
Well, my position is that officers should not be there to prosecute, that officers in schools should not be there to keep students in line or to police students. I know the firsthand experience of that. My brother was impacted by that. He was suspended. He was expelled from middle school a couple years after Columbine because he said something he shouldn't have said it, but he said it in the hallway, and he was expelled, and that put him a year behind his classmates and into really a cycle of issues with police and the folks in authority. So I'm not a proponent of having police in school to police students, but to protect them and to have positive relationships with school staff and with students and their families.
And Andre, your fellow candidate, picking up on an issue that you have been tackling as well. It sounds like all of you have, but it's wrestling with this idea that we should not be kicking students out for disciplinary problems, but we should be embracing them and finding out a way to reach them instead of just kicking them out on the street. For people who aren't familiar with what a deep problem that is in Knox County schools, what are the numbers?
Yeah, so basically it's more percentage-wise. So black students are getting suspended and expelled 3 times more likely than their white counterparts. That same percentage goes to also their able-bodied or disabled counterparts. That's been going on for the last couple of years, right? So also there's been an increase actually this year with disparities when it comes to Hispanic suspensions. Now some would say like, well, because there's more,
the population is growing, right?
It could be also that, there's added stress because of the current political climate, right? These kids are scared of being taken out their schools, right, by ICE. That's just the reality. And sometimes that come out in a different way, right? So how we embrace our immigrant and refugee students, that's something that we need to tackle, right? But it's there.
So do you all see, I'm sorry, Don, but I just wanted to know from you, do you think there's become an effective way to manage that, to challenge the status quo and say, hey, we're going to do things differently?
Yeah, I think, going back to the budget, so it saves money, right? So it comes like restorative justice, cultural competency, it don't cost that much money, right? So a lot of people talk about morality. Now, this is all morality. We're here for morality, right? We have certain values, right? But some people like money, right? So this is how you save money. So less punitive measures when it comes to policing, criminalization of our youth. Just put these programs in, and then, we're all trying to pay taxes, right? So I'm saving you taxes, right? We're just moving the money, right? We're not increasing the budget, because I know we can say whatever we want out the budget, but county commission, the mayor approves of that, right? So to make them look good, right? Just about invest and divest.
So Evetty, let me start with you, because Andre has talked. I work in this system a bunch, representing accused students, and the quote zero tolerance policy. And what happens with a student if they get caught with just a scrap of marijuana or alcohol is they get suspended for 180 school days, which is an effective year, and they have a choice basically. They can go to Yoakley, okay, Richard Yoakley, which is the alternative school, quote unquote, or they can take online education. And I have watched so many of these kids get lost in that system. And frankly, being a criminal defense lawyer, I've been to prisons that look more orderly than Richard Yoakley, and I'm troubled by what goes on there. What would be your solution on minor, I'm not talking about kids with weapons and kids that are a danger to other students, but minor infractions that are yielding a year out of school? What would you suggest to Bob Thomas and the school board be done to effectively care for these kids?
So I think that a lot of it, there's practices already being in place. So they're doing a pilot of restorative justice. I had the opportunity as a citizen deputy juvenile officer to actually do restorative justice and see what that looks like. But it only works if we fully fund it and if we have the buy-in from the teachers and everyone around. So that's one initiative that's already being piloted, and I think it will really work, and we will see. So a minor infraction, you go through that process.
Can you explain what restorative justice is for our viewers who aren't familiar with it?
Yeah, and Andre might be able to do it a little bit better than I will, but from my experience when I was working and actually doing the practices, it's actually opportunity for the offender and the person that did the offending to sit down and have a conversation about what was impacted, what happened through this encounter, and you kind of conflict resolution, right? You have a conversation about what happened, who all was impacted, and how do you move forward with this situation. So mediation, conversation.
Your thoughts on that idea that Don presented as well?
No, absolutely. I think restorative justice practices are the way to go. Again, I also go back to making sure that we have mental health services available in our schools on a consistent basis, because there's some infractions that need to be dealt with a sit down with a professional who can help a child process through some things that may be happening at home or some things that happen in their personal life. Not every infraction needs to go to the principal or needs to result in a student being kicked out of class. That, to me, it's not. If I don't want to be at school because I have this very challenging situation at home, kicking me out of class does not help the situation.
Right. I'm just very troubled by the young man or woman who might be 17, caught with a little bit of alcohol or a little bit of marijuana in their car in the parking lot, being put out of school for 1 year and sent to either Yoakley or online to finish school. That's really troubling.
I had I met with a parent from Farragut, and her daughter was caught with a pain pill, right? It wasn't even nothing serious, and she was put out of school. The parent had so many issues with getting her child enrolled to the online school, in a sense, and that was a difficult burden, but the student pressed through, and she was determined. All of our kids are not that determined or driven to make it happen.
Well, Don, the bill that passed this past week on this, setting up these recovery high schools, may be a solution. I know they start with one in East, Middle, and West, and kids that
but that's
have
for
drug
kids
issues.
that are addicted versus just may have
like
a small
said,
amount that may
amount.
not be addicted, may be experimenting, may be trying to find their way, but aren't dealing, aren't addicted.
Right.
And there's this middle ground that we're losing so many students to that I'm worried about.
Well, the opioid problem we know is a problem. You were talking about prescription pain pill. Would you all support, there's been some discussion about putting naloxone in schools and having it available to kids that are addicted and they're coming to school on pain pills. Where would you stand? I would assume that'd be something the board would have to approve.
Well, I think even before we get to that point, we don't even have full-time nurses in all of our schools.
Right.
So some of our kids, perhaps because they don't have access to medical services at home, we don't. There are several schools, many schools in our district, where a nurse is going in between 4 or 5 different schools to provide care. And I think before we can provide that, we need to fully fund and provide nursing services to students in our schools.
Evetty, is that your perspective as well?
I think that sounds good in theory, right? But what does the practice look like? A lot of things we have great ideas, but what is the implementation, and do we have the capacity right now to make that happen?
Well, we have got to leave the conversation there, but we appreciate the three of you being generous with your time on this Sunday morning, and thank you for running. It takes a lot of courage to put your name out there. So
Thank you.
We'll be back with our talk around right after this.